we're going to talk about Terry Pratchett and death, not the topic you're maybe thinking of, which involves his having passed in 2015 and the right for people to go out on their own terms, and that whole issue that he had when he discovered he had a debilitating disease and wanted to check out rather than just let it do its course to him. I'm going to instead talk about the character of death. Death is essentially much what you think of it in terms of a skeleton with a robe who basically serves in order to remove individuals whose time it is in order to send them on. Matter of fact, as he puts it himself in the book Feet of Clay, I am death, not taxes. I turn up only once. And yeah, if that sounds a little bit like Christopher Lee, yeah, at one point, Christopher Lee did portray death in an adaptation of soul music. So forgive me if my Christopher Lee doesn't always work out so well. Now, Pratchett's death, of course, starts out in this manner, although over time he does go beyond that. He starts actually wondering about the individuals that he deals with. Because a concept gets introduced fairly soon into the cycle of works where the gods of Discworld are essentially manifestations as wished for by people, which is an interesting way to turn it on its head, because from a humanist standpoint, the fact that the gods are not actually responsible in people's lives, but the people make up the lives of the gods themselves. And it is in that sense that we get to see a very strong humanist message. And the fact that death is a character that really is trying to do his best. To him, he started off trying to go non-gender, but it didn't work after 4 books. He's trying to do his best to better understand the foibles of humanity. On the one hand, he works with them, and at the same time, he's fascinated with them, which is an interesting inversion of the obsession with death a lot of cultures have in our world. The fact that in his contacts, he gets more so interested in what they are doing. In fact, he gets to be wonderfully observant, in fact, in terms of what he sees. He's asked by a character in Sorcerer, what is there in this universe that truly makes living worthwhile? Which he answers, cots. Cots are nice. Yep. It's because after having had contact, he sees things that he believes would be good things to have in life, or at least your existence, which is why he sets up a house that he lives in, sets up all sorts of fine china. He has a bedroom, even though he never sleeps. He also interacts even more so with humanity. At one point, a young girl who he was scheduled to take at that moment, he decides instead to leave her. And after a while, she grows up to a point where, as a foundling, he takes her in as a foster daughter. At one point, he decides to do what other humans do and take on an apprentice, Mortimer, also known Mort, who's the title of the book he was in, who proved not to be that good at his job. Although Mort and Isabel, his adopted daughter, do ultimately come together, and from their union comes a granddaughter named Susan. And the relationship between Susan and Death is an interesting one, in that on the one hand, he sees her as a great connection to the realm of the living. And on the other hand, she herself serves as a great foil to ask him all sorts of opinions as to why things are the way they are, to which he really doesn't have an answer. One point in the book Hogfather, where she asks about why they need to have myths. She asks, I'm not stupid. You're saying humans need fantasies to make life bearable? Really? As if it was some kind of pink pill? No, humans need fantasy to be human, to be the place where the falling angel meets the rising ape. Tooth fairies, hogfathers? Yes, as practice, you have to start out learning to believe the little lies. So we can believe the big ones? Yes, justice, mercy, duty, that sort of thing. That's not the same at all. You think so? And take the universe and grind it down to the finest powder and sieve it through the finest sieve, and then show me one atom of justice, one molecule of mercy. And yet you act as if there's some ideal order in the world, as if there is some rightness in the universe by which it may be judged. Yes, but people have got to believe that, or what's the point? My point exactly. You need to believe in things that aren't true. How else can they become? And it's with that we realize that death is a great foil for us, that he calls us out on what we have done. And in many ways, having death serve as the ultimate proponent of life is truly what makes his character especially interesting for humanists. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Masterful presentation on death. I loved it. He's, I must say, he's not my favorite character in the books. I have, because though he recurs a lot. My favorite character is Brotha in Small Gods, and that's because Small Gods is my favorite book. But death is certainly a constant, and you think you have him figured out, and you don't. You don't ever have death figured out. And he's really, he'll surprise you in every book, and I love it. So for my presentation on Terry Pratchett, I love Terry Pratchett. I fell in love with him as a teenager, and I've read. I don't think I've read every one of his books, but close to. I've read 40 some of his books. And my favorite series, obviously, his absolutely amazing series, Discworld. But I have a favorite in Discworld. I like all the books in Discworld, but my absolute favorite is Small Gods. I'm a rabbi, and it's a book that focuses on the absurdities of religion, and so of course I'm going to enjoy it. But I want to focus on one particular aspect of Terry Pratchett, something that makes him worth reading again and again, and that is his knack for pithy sayings, for proverbs, for getting the right wording of absurdity. And I've been teaching a class, a wisdom class, since the beginning of COVID, and we go through books of wisdom literature, ancient books of wisdom literature. Sometimes we find some proverbs that are relevant to the present days. Most of the time we don't. Sometimes we talk about it and talk about how it could be relevant, parts of it that could be relevant. With Terry Pratchett, I don't have to search for it. It's there. His sayings are relevant. Everything he says, I say, okay, yes. It's truly, I can read it. His keen observation is, and his humor about it is just laugh out loud maybe not every page, but every second page, meaning really an unbelievable joy to read. And that's what I enjoy most about Terry Pratchett. And I wanted to share with you some of the proverbs from Small Gods. These proverbs are sprinkled over all of his books, but I chose to focus on Small Gods because it's my favorite book. So a little bit about Small Gods, the idea behind Small Gods. One of the Terry Pratchett had this idea that the strength of a god, the power of a god, was dependent on the number of people who believed in that god. And if no one believed, gods were like, buzzing around like insects. And if no one believed in them, they were like almost non-existent, but they were still there. But the minute they had a believer, they had substance. They were something. This book is about a particular god called Maybe it's Om. I don't know entirely how to pronounce it. but who's the god of a giant religion, except that many people said that they were believers in and there was this whole ecclesiastical structure with bishops and the Inquisition and what have you. But actually, had only one believer, one person who truly believed in and the strength of a god is dependent on their believers. So took the shape of a tortoise. And so the book is about the conversations between one of the main character, Bratha, and this tortoise as the god navigates his his lowly state, despite being ostensibly the god of like a major world religion. So it's very has a lot of potential for humor. And so, there are all kinds of statements about religion, theology that just make you laugh out loud, because they strike at the absurdities. So here, I'm going to read you some, and we'll discuss a little. Okay, one that I really liked is something that goes against I would say the modern gospel of prosperity, a commandment from one of the books of from the Septateuch, which is like a play on the Jewish Pentateuch, of course, the Jewish 5 books of Moses. Thou shalt not submit thy God to market forces. So I love the reason I love this is the reason I love this quote is because you see what happens when the tie between prosperity and religion, and riches and religion really just becomes unholy and unhealthy, and especially it plagues especially certain American versions of Christianity. It exists in other places in the world, but he said it in a sublime way. I love it. Thou shalt not submit thy God to market forces. Here's a statement about a short dialogue about the Inquisition. So here, sometimes the head inquisitor says sometimes the crime follows the punishment, which only serves to prove the foresight of the great God. That's what my grandmother used to say, said Bratha automatically. Indeed, I would like to know more about this formidable lady. She used to give me a thrashing every morning because I would certainly do something to deserve it during the day. So again, turning sin and punishment on his head. I just love it. Those kind of dialogues between the Inquisitor and Bratha are all strewn throughout the story. Just like Daddy and Jim, I really urge you, if you want to just laugh and have a good time and just be intellectually stimulated at the same time, just pick up any of his books. But there's some that Jim has his favorite. I have my favorite. I'm sure Daddy has his favorite too. But all his books are good. Anyway, let's look at a few others. Here, this is what is a little less humorous. Belief, he says, belief shifts. People start out believing in the God and end up believing in the structure. And so, this is about, people go through the motions of piety, and that becomes what's important about their religious practice, and belief in God and anything that don't really have anything to do with it. And that's why the book, the crux of the book is that this God, that people believed in the structure but didn't believe in the God anymore, and that God only had one believer. So that's also a nice statement about belief. Here's what I think, not about God, but about politics a little. So there's a nation called the Phoebians in Small Gods and in Terry Pratchett in Discworld in general. They're like the Greeks, the ancient Greeks. So they are like they are the originators of democracy. So here's a quote about the Phoebians. The Phoebians believed that every man should have the vote, provided that he wasn't poor, foreign, nor disqualified by reason of being mad, frivolous, or a woman. Every 5 years, someone was elected to be tyrant, provided he could prove that he was honest, intelligent, sensible, and trustworthy. Immediately after he was elected, of course, it was obvious to everyone that he was a criminal madman and totally out of touch with the view of the ordinary philosopher in the street looking for a towel. And then 5 years later, they elected another one just like him. And really, it was amazing how intelligent people kept on making the same mistakes. So this is I would say a nice statement about the naivete that is part of such a big part of our political system, where you give the next person in line the benefit of the doubt, but politicians, some politicians are absolutely horrible, as we all know. But in general, this view is a cynic's view of the political system, and I especially like reading it today. Here, another one about philosophers, and something I really take to heart. So, what's a philosopher, said Bratha? Someone who's bright enough to find a job with no heavy lifting, said a voice in his head. So yes, philosophy. So one could say the same about humanity, about the humanities in general. So somebody who's been attracted to that field of study, at least I've been bright enough to find a job with no heavy lifting. So I'm happy to fit into that rubric. Here's one about us. So he says gods like to see an atheist around. It gives them something to aim at. So he said, in the Discworld, there are atheists in the Discworld, which is fairly absurd considering that gods are ever present there. But there are some atheists, and and he has his fun with them. Okay. So here, this is the last one I want to discuss. His philosophy was a mixture of three famous schools: the Cynics, the Stoics, and the Epicureans. So very famous philosophical schools, and summed all three of them up in his famous phrase: "You can't trust any bugger further than you can throw him, and there's nothing you can do about it. So let's have a drink." So that's I love that statement, and and so with that I will say l'chaim, let's have a drink, and please pick up a Terry Pratchett book as the next book that you plan to read.